the Bible, the word, is the Lord giving us an opportunity to have insight into his mind. Like, if you want to know what some of the thoughts of God are, you have the opportunity to read his word. That is a privilege. Because if God wanted to be a God that was far off, far away, you could not touch him, you could not know him, you could not understand him, he could have chosen to be that. But instead, he chooses to be a God that comes alongside us and lives very close with us. And not only does he live alongside us, he gives us opportunity to have insight into his mind. Hey everybody, it's Busy Mark and I am back with another video, but before we begin, I am pleased to announce that The Modest Fitting has officially launched a women's clothing boutique offering skirts and dresses that embody modesty, femininity, and beauty. To learn more about dresses like this one and others available for purchase, head over to themodestfitting.com. But without further ado, let's begin. So I am back, and today I'm coming to you with a video on things to be thankful to God for. I think that it is sometimes really easy to make our prayer time to the Lord focus solely on requests that we are making for things that we don't have that we would like to have, or things that are not happening that we would like to see happen. And I think it's really easy for us to slide into a habit of forgetting to be grateful and forgetting to have an attitude of just thankfulness to the Lord. And I kind of recognize that in myself some years ago, and I asked the Lord to just help me to see the things that I could be thankful for and things that I could thank him for, because I just realized I didn't really have an eye to really appreciate all the things that he has done. And he was really faithful to answer my prayer in that. But I just wanted to bring some of those things to your attention, and perhaps they might be things that you might start incorporating into your everyday life to thank God for, and just making gratitude a regular practice in your life. I know, like, one of the kind of trendy things right now is that, like, just like practice gratitude. But I think that there's actually something to that. I think that there's biblical roots in, the Bible says, like, I'm not gonna remember the exact wording, but I'll put it on the screen. It says something like, bring your supplications to the Lord alongside thanksgiving. Like, even in his word, he said, hey, make your requests known alongside thanking God for the things that he has already done. And one of the things that I noticed after I asked God to help me to see the things that I could be thankful for, I started to experience more happiness. And I know in Christian circles, we make distinctions between joy and happiness. Joy is something that's kind of like, it's not dependent on your emotional state. It's kind of just a resolved understanding that we have hope and we have joy in our Savior, and that everything that has been said about him is true, and that he is going to come back to us. And it gives us kind of an emotion-resistant joy. And then happiness is more, at least in Christian circles, like, happiness is more on the temporal end, where it's like, it's an elated feeling. It certainly plays into the emotions. And what I found is that when I practice gratitude on a regular basis, where I thank the Lord for things every day, I had the joy, which he gave me, but I saw an increase in emotional and temporal happiness in practicing and observing gratefulness. So I think that there is value in taking time to pause and to consider all of the things that we can thank God for, because I think that while it blesses the Lord, it returns back to us, and that it's a kind of it just lifts the mood. It opens your eyes when you understand all that you can be thankful for. You can't help but just to experience a lighter feeling, and gratitude births in you a kind of happiness. And I do believe that that's true. So the first thing that I wanted to add to my list is family. Be thankful and grateful for family. And I know for depending on what kind of family you came from, that either is something that you're like, it's a given, duh, I'm grateful for my family, or it's something that strikes a nerve. But I think regardless of if you came from a family of righteous people, or even if you came from a family of wicked people, something that comes to mind is the story of Joseph. And if you're not familiar with that story, you should read it. I think it's in the book of Genesis. And he was a man who I think it's clear and fair to say that he came from a family of really wicked brothers who hated him so much that they thought to kill him, but instead, settled on just instead selling him into slavery. That's a really negative family experience. And yet, Joseph, at the end of his life, looked back and could see how what they meant for evil, God had worked together for his ultimate good. And so even the people who you may find in your realm of relatives who may be acting towards you in ways of wickedness or with evil intent, even that, without them realizing it, they are playing into a plan that the Lord is ultimately working together for good. Now, sometimes how that good comes about is not evident in the beginning, and it certainly wasn't evident to Joseph when he was in the pit. It wasn't evident to him when he ended up being a slave in Potiphar's house, nor was it evident to him when he was in prison. But after he became second only to Pharaoh in the nation of Egypt, it became clear to him how God was working through all of it in the end. And so even though his family in that season and in that moment was wicked, there's still a room to have an attitude of gratitude, because even what they are meaning for bad things for you can still be woven together to be good things in a way that you can, I know it sounds strange, but thank them. Like, you can thank them for how they unknowingly and unwittingly played into God's plan for your life. The next thing that I think it's good to be grateful for is health. And this is one that I'm sure if you've been around people who are mindful about their health, they'll probably say that they're grateful for their health. But I think that it's something that if you've regularly just been a person that's in good health, it can be easy to take for granted what existing in a healthy body can mean. You typically don't value it until you have to, even just for a season, exist in a body that is fighting off disease or fighting off illness or succumbing to some sort of whatever the case might be. We don't understand how valuable it is to be able to wake up and not feel pain. We don't know what it is to, many of us don't know what it is to not have a disease that requires that we test our blood levels and we do all of these tests all throughout the day, every single day. It's just, if you have health in your body and you can get up and move around and get to the work of your day and without having to give it much thought, because your body just like responds to whatever cues your brain is sending to your limbs and they can work and they can function, that's something to thank God for. Like, if you got 10 toes and you've got mobility in all 10 of your toes, like, that's something to thank God for. And so that's something that I thank God for. I even thank him for the fact that I have 5 functioning senses, that I can see, that I can taste, that I can hear, that I can feel things. Like, these are things that when they're functioning, you don't understand the role that they're playing, but when they're taken away, when a disease takes away your ability to feel. For some of us who got caught up in the whole panini that's been happening in the last couple of years, some of us lost our ability to taste and smell. And listening to people who, it's the little things. I had a friend of mine who said, I just miss the smell of coffee. Like, I would love to be able to smell the smell of coffee again. And I thought, wow, like, there's so much that we take for granted, and there's so much that we can thank God for in the fact that we have a healthy body that functions as he designed it to function. The next thing is your home. And your home may not be a single family house with 2 stories. It might be a tiny apartment. It might be the basement in your parents' house. Your home might be whatever the circumstance, but your home, whatever the circumstances might be, is something to be grateful for. You might be in a home that is a starter home that needs work, and so you're in we had a couple over who said, we bought a starter home, we're in the middle of doing all of the renovations, and it's not quite comfortable yet to be in it, but we're working through it. And so regardless of what the circumstances are, thank God that you have a home. There are some people who don't have a base. They don't have a home base. They don't have a place that they can reliably come to at the end of the day. They don't have a reliable place that they can rest their head and get sleep at night. And this is something that if you've never dealt with the misfortune that is homelessness, it's something that can be taken for granted, even if it's like a rinky-dink apartment that you kind of don't really like, but it's still a reliable place that you know is a space that you can occupy and it belongs to you. That's something that creates a lot of just mental safety and just a place to be able to, it's a thing of steadfastness that makes you feel secured and anchored in some way. And there are some people who don't have that. They don't know where they're going to sleep. They don't know where they're going to be able to lay their head. They don't know where their children are going to be able to lay their head. And so if you have a home, regardless of what condition it is in, or if it's renting, or if it's ownership, or if it's apartment, or whatever, thank God for your home. The next thing that I think is good to thank God for is your work. And obviously in this corner of the internet, for most of us, the work that I'm talking about is the work of homemaking, which is inclusive of serving your husband first and foremost, serving your children, and then keeping your home so that it's a place where your family can be comfortable and have a haven and thrive and all of those things. But regardless of what work you're doing, there is a kind of gift that comes from work. And I think we see that kind of reflected in the book of Ecclesiastes. And while I know that Ecclesiastes is generally understood to be kind of a negative and cynical book about life, there are some portions in it that says like the best thing that you can hope for in life is to enjoy your toil. Like if you can find some happiness and some fulfillment in your toil, count yourself fortunate. And I've come to understand that that is really true. I think that the most fulfilled people are people who can find meaningfulness and purposefulness in the work that they are doing. When you know whatever the work is, whatever the work might be, whether it's ironing some napkins so that you can just fold them up pretty and put them on the table, or if you're doing the dishes, or if you're sweeping under the table for the 100th time in that day, if you are able to understand that this work, no matter how mundane it is, has meaning and it serves a purpose, there's a kind of reward that is in that. And so thank God for your work. Thank God for the opportunity that we have work that we are then able to find meaning in, that can produce things that are fruitful for ourselves and for our families. Thank God for work.
What is that? I think it's a bug. Ew.
Touch it.
Look. Is that a bug?
It is.
Is that a bug?
Is it a bug?
I don't know. I don't know. Ew. It's like not coming off.
I guess it is a bug. Because bug doesn't stick to this thing.
I cannot. Ew. I don't see it anymore. Ew. That's nasty.
I raised it from that tail in the trash or breaking off these buckets.
The next thing that we can thank God for is the fact that we have food and that we have life-giving food at that. This is like one of my more brainiac moments, but I remember I was having a conversation with someone, I think I was in high school actually, and we were discussing how we were grateful for the fact that we had food and that the food was healthy and that it was delicious. And our reasoning was that, like, if God wanted to, he could have just made the thing that sustains our body, just like this little rectangular gray block that had 100% of the nutrients, 100% of the protein, all of the fiber that we need. It could just have been in this tasteless little block, and we could just eat that. It's kind of like, you know, those little pellets that you can feed to like hamsters and guinea pigs. Like, God could have made the extent of our food something equivalent to the pellet fed to a guinea pig or the pellet fed to a hamster. But instead, he decided to fill the earth with, I think, an innumerable amount of fruits, vegetables, all kinds of animals that can produce things that we can then eat. Like, we've got eggs, dairy, and then the dairy can be taken to make like countless food items. And it's just like, he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to make just the mundane task of nourishing and keeping our bodies going. He didn't have to make that provision artistic, and yet he did. He didn't have to make it not only beautiful and extensive, but he also made it delicious. And then he let us participate by giving us different spices, different seasonings, and let us participate in the creative realm that is culinary arts. He didn't have to do all that. He could have just made it in that we eat the little pellets that the hamsters eat and that guinea pigs eat. He could have made it very boring, but instead he made it very artistic and very creative. And there's something to thank God for in that, the fact that he made such a variety of things, food items available to us, and the fact that, at least for right now, we're not in famine. Like, when we go to the grocery store, we not only have the things that we need, we have things that we don't even need. We have the things that we need in an overabundance. We can even be choosy about, I don't want this particular brand of peanut butter. I want this brand. Like, the fact that we even get to have peanut butter and then 50 different brands to choose from. Like, the way that God blesses us is so over the top. It's so grandiose that we can, I think, be blind to it. And so that's another thing to thank God for the food, like all of the different foods that he has made available. Consider that there are some countries that are eating fruits and vegetables that you've never seen before, that you've never even heard of before. Imagine that. That, like, it blows my mind to consider how vastly and over the top his provision is around food. And he didn't have to do that. The next thing to, I think, be grateful for is teaching. And not so much in that you doing the teaching, but that you have access to teaching, to other people's teachings. And that could be inclusive of, you know, the education system, the fact that all of us have an opportunity to be educated if we so desire. We have the opportunity to pursue higher education, but it even goes beyond that. Like, we have the opportunity to derive wisdom from the word. We have the opportunity to derive wisdom from wise elders, both in our families and in our communities. Like, some of the most invaluable information that you will ever come across is likely locked up in the mind of an older person who has lived a life of righteousness and obedience to the Lord. That person has a wealth of knowledge that all you would have to do is just sit at their feet and listen, and you would be edified just in having listened to them talk for 20 minutes. Like, that's a privilege to be able to have access to that kind of teaching. And I think that the internet takes that to an entirely different level, such that if you weren't necessarily blessed to have those wise elders in your family, people whose lives have been characterized and are constituted in wisdom, in obedience to the Lord, such that they can, you know, impart to you wisdom from him and what their experience is. Even if you don't have that, the internet makes it so that you can access people who do. And so just teaching in general, having access to teachings, is a privilege, and it's something to be grateful to the Lord for. The next one is a good night's sleep. I've always been grateful for sleep, but I became doubly grateful for sleep once I understood that there are some people that, you know, when they lay their head down at night, they don't fall asleep, you know, or they lay down, maybe they can fall asleep, but they don't sleep very soundly. Like the sleep is not restful. It's not satisfying. They wake up. It's like eating but then not being satisfied. It's sleeping but not waking up rested. And there's something that's so terrible about that. And if that's not you, if you are able to, when you go to sleep at night, you sleep pretty good. Like, I always know that I've slept really good when I have crazy dreams. Like, when my dreams are like insane and I'm like, I gotta write this down because this was insane. That's when I know I slept really good. And so I like, if you get those kind of good nights rest and you wake up the next day ready to go, that's something to thank God for, because sleep is something that eludes some of us. Some of us don't get to partake in that sweet and peaceful sleep. The next thing to thank God for is nature. And particularly for me, something that I really appreciate is the fact that we can smell fresh air. I remember shortly after my family and I relocated to a state that was full of greenery, I would go out in the morning and just get in a morning walk. And I would walk, at the time we were living in an apartment, and I would walk out of my apartment and I would say, like, who is spraying perfume? Like, every morning I would walk out there and it was like, I don't know if someone was getting up before me and they were heading out to work, and so they had like freshly sprayed cologne or perfume on them, and it was still lingering when I would go out. But it's like every morning I could smell it. I would go out there and I'd be just, who is spraying the perfume? It took me about 10 days to realize it wasn't perfume. It was the smell of fresh air. I had the opportunity of living in an area that was so encompassed by all of these beautiful, healthy, gigantic trees that what I was smelling was the fragrance of the trees. The trees were fragrancing the air, and that's when I understood I'm smelling fresh air. I'm having the privilege of being able to smell fresh air. If you can have that opportunity, thank God for it. The other thing that I'm so grateful for is the sun. There are few things. This is one of the perks. If you are able to observe the practice of rising while it is still yet night, as we read in Proverbs, what that means is if you get up before the sun, you'll have an opportunity to observe the beauty that is a sunrise. I don't know that there are many things that are more beautiful than a horizon when the sun is coming up. The colors, it's just, we talk about some of the famous painters and the artists that our generation has seen and generations past have seen. There is no painter more talented. There is no artist better at matching complementary colors than God himself. And it's a free demonstration and debut of his work every morning and every evening at sunrise and sunset. There are few things that are more beautiful than that. And every time I see it, I'm reminded, that's my God. That's my God who did that, who is doing that, and who will do it tomorrow, and who has done it for every day that the sun has come up and has gone down. He has painted the sky. It's just, thank God. Thank God that we have the opportunity to see his work, to see his craftsmanship even, and have the ability to perceive the beauty in what he does every day and every morning for free. For free. We don't have to pay to see it. The other thing that I think is good to thank the Lord for is music. Again, music is one of the things that I feel like it's just one of the ways in which the Lord went above and beyond, and he was over the top in his creativity and his artistry in creating the human being and giving us resources and giving us creativity and intellect to be able to bring things together. But do you know how unnecessary music is? If he just didn't want to include that in the realm and spectrum of things that we could participate in, he could have just as easily not done it. but instead he chose to give us the ability to make instruments and then to learn how to master these instruments. And I read about how King David was a skilled player of the harp, and how drums are just something that's really ingrained in a lot of different cultures. I know in African cultures, drums play an incredible role in the music that's produced across, being that I'm from Florida, I'm very well acquainted with Caribbean culture and Hispanic culture. And I think about salsa and bachata from the Dominican Republic, and how drums and percussion just play incredible roles in these beautiful displays of music, individuality, and creativity, and how it can be an expression of culture and across different ethnicities, and how it is a privilege to be able to listen to how all of the different people groups use the same instruments that the Lord made available to us, and then yet came up with these styles of music that sound so different. And it makes me think about how, if this is how good music can sound in a world tainted by sin, how is the music going to sound when we get on the other side and we're in the presence of God, free of sin, in perfect holiness and righteousness? What is that music going to sound like? Can you imagine? If the music that we have now, even with its corruption from our own hearts that have been tainted with sin, if it sounds this good, imagine how good it's going to sound when we get to heaven. It's another thing to thank God for. And I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to what kind of music and what kind of songs we will sing in heaven. The other thing I want to thank the Lord for is color and the ability to perceive color. Not all animals see in color. Some animals only see in black and white, and God could have done the same thing with us, and yet he gave us the ability to perceive distinctions in color. It takes me back to what I was mentioning before about the sunrise and the sunset. He could have made it so that that's something that we missed out on, but instead he gave us the ability to perceive it and to enjoy it. And then he expressed even the different colors that he can make in our skin tones and all of the different people groups. Like, there's something really amazing when you as a single human being step back and you look at the vast array of all of God's creativity and the different people groups, even down to the different shades of skin that he's given people. Like the fact that we can perceive color, we can be creative with color, we can paint, we can do makeup. I've seen people do beautiful things with makeup. Like, just color in general. He didn't, again, it's just like sprinkle. It's just the sprinkles on top. He didn't have to do that, and yet he did. And it's something to be grateful for. When you look out the window and you can see the greenery of the trees against the contrasting colors of the roses and the flowers, it's like he didn't have to do all that. When you look at, there is a bird that's local to my area, and it's beautiful. It's jet black, and at the same time bright red, bright orange, bright yellow. And when I see that bird, and I'm just like, all of these colors on this single bird in a very sad, like, I remember I jokingly told my husband, I wish I were as beautiful as that bird because the bird was just so beautiful. I'm like, people pay money to create makeup looks similar to what this bird just looks like naturally. And it's like, God gave him all of those colors, and it's amazing to me. Like, it's amazing. Like, color, it's something to thank God for. It's a gift. It's a privilege that we get to even just see beautiful things. Think of the butterflies, and just, I saw the other day a butterfly that was pure white, just like a white butterfly. I'm like, who does that? God. God does that. Thank him for that. Thank him for color. Thank him for the expression that is in color, and that we can enjoy it, and we have the privilege to see it. The next thing that I would say to thank the Lord for, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I wanted to go into more depth now, is the Word. The Bible is something that's easy to take for granted, but you shouldn't, because the Bible, the Word, is the Lord giving us an opportunity to have insight into his mind. Like, if you want to know what some of the thoughts of God are, you have the opportunity to read his word. That is a privilege. Because if God wanted to be a God that was far off, far away, you could not touch him, you could not know him, you could not understand him, he could have chosen to be that. But instead, he chooses to be a God that comes alongside us and lives very close with us. And not only does he live alongside us, he gives us opportunity to have insight into his mind. Like, that's something that's reserved for close friends. That's something that's reserved for family. People who do not know you do not have the opportunity to know the thoughts of your mind. There's a way that a husband and wife have knowledge of each other's mind in a way that other people don't. And God says that I want to have such a relationship with you, a relationship of such intimacy, that I will give you insight into my mind. That's an incredible privilege. And it's something to thank God for. That's part of the reason why I'm so happy to read my Bible every morning, because I know that when I'm opening these pages and I'm reading these words, he's giving me and inviting me to understand his mind and to know him. And there's a privilege in that. There's privilege in being able to read the word of God, because he didn't have to. He could have made it so that he kept all of his thoughts private and secret. And some of the things he has kept secret, but some of the things he's chosen to share with us, and that's a privilege. And I thank him for that. We should thank him for that. And lastly, the last thing on my list to thank the Lord for is his past, present, future, and ongoing investment in us as daughters. I look back at my own life and I can see clearly, looking back, how the Lord was the whole time investing in my understanding, investing in my instruction, investing in my wisdom, investing in my guidance. There were times where I realized I could have really gone off the rails, but instead he kept me on the path. Like the shepherd guiding the sheep with his rod, the Lord did that with me. And I can see the value that he has placed on me to take that kind of time with me. The Lord has been patient with me in a way that no human being has ever been patient with me. And I've had people who have loved me enough to be extremely patient with me. And yet God has surpassed even them. And it's because I can look back and see how he has counted me worthy to invest in me, and has taken the time to train me and instruct me and grow me and make me mature and use me. I feel settled that I can trust him for that in the future, because he was doing it even when I wasn't aware and when I wasn't grateful for his investment. So how much more that now that I can see it and be like, wow, God, thank you for your investment in me. I can trust him to continue in that in the future. That's not something to take for granted. If the Lord is keeping you, and if you can look back and see how he kept you and have faith to know that he will continue to keep you, that's not something to take for granted. That's something to thank God for. And thank him for that today. So these are some just off, I think this was 13 or so things. These are some of the things that I've learned to start thanking the Lord for. What other things have you come to understand are not things to take for granted, but instead to be very intentional about thanking the Lord for? Include those in the comment section below. Last bit is I would recommend that if you can, in addition to having a prayer journal, like literally where you write down your prayers, have a section where you have a list of things that you thank the Lord for every day, so that you can get into the habit of thanking God. If you don't have that list started yet, use some of the things that we discussed today. Check the comment section below for other suggestions from other people about things that you can thank the Lord for. But get it on pen and paper, things to thank God for, and observe thanking him for those things every day. Thank God for at least one thing, even though you have much more, but at least one thing. Thank him for one thing every single day, because there's so much that he does for us that he doesn't require that we thank him. We don't even think to thank him because we don't recognize the way in which he's taking care of us. So slow down long enough to understand how He cares for you, and thank Him for those things. But as always, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.